Okay, welcome everyone. We're glad you're here on a Thursday afternoon, as it is here in Redlands, and whatever time it may be where you are. We're really glad you took this opportunity to attend. Let's begin by introducing ourselves. My name is Bernd Zakowski, and I'm a tech evangelist and product manager at Esri.
I'm Diana Lavery. I'm a product engineer at Esri.
I'm Matt Arts. I'm a content strategist at Esri.
All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and begin. This will be kind of a sort of a loose and informal opportunity for you to learn a little bit about some of the tips and best practices that we recommend as you work with ArcGIS Online. This seminar will present an overview of those tips, but these aren't necessarily hard rules. They're just things to consider as you lift and evolve your organization. So this workshop has actually evolved over many years and was presented last year as a half-day workshop. And based on that, we've recently published this Esri Press ebook. It's free to view and download and is updated regularly. And you can find that at go.esri.com/extend. And what we're going to present here today are some sections and excerpts taken from that ebook, and we hope you enjoy what we're about to present, and just download the ebook at any time and share it with others, and always check back for updates as they do happen. So we've divided this workshop into a couple of different sections, and we're saving time for questions after each of these sections. So you can submit your questions at any time, and Matt will go through them, and we'll answer those after each. And at the end, we'll have some time for general questions or combined questions covering all the topics. Now, after the conference, we'll bundle all of the resources, the PowerPoint presentations and the notes, and all the questions with answers, and we're going to make those available to you after the conference, and we'll just drop you an email. And last year when we did this, we just put it into an ArcGIS Online group and shared it out for you, and we're planning on doing that again this year. So keep an eye out for those, and they'll be available shortly after the conference. So let's begin with the first section, which is about putting your best foot forward. And it's important to do that with respect to how others perceive your organization and also your work. Now, to put your best foot forward, you have to pay attention to some details, but a few details can go a very long way to making yourself and your work and your organization shine. So let's begin by talking about a destination, where your members and the public will go to find your maps, apps, and more. Now, your organization homepage is the place many visitors and all organization members will start. And how your homepage looks and what visitors will find there will create first impressions, not just about you as a GIS organization, but also impressions about the quality and the veracity of what people will find there. So people do judge books by their cover. So it's really important to have a professional looking, aesthetic, and well-organized homepage, whether you're exposing it only within your organization or to a more public audience. Now, these examples we think are great looking sites and provide really good first impressions, an impression of professionalism and content that you can trust. And we'll take a closer look at these sites in just a few minutes. Now, while the aesthetic impression is important, success is really more about just cosmetics. It's about how the site actually works and what it offers to visitors as they visit your site, and also how they work with what you've offered them. So one thing you have to do is you have to pay attention to the anonymous and signed in experience. So there's certain techniques that you can apply to present even things like the navigation bar tabs and also the content on your homepage to either a public audience or to people within your organization. So that's all customizable. So to check that out, you're going to have to go take a look at your homepage, both signed in and also anonymously. And it's always best to never to accept the defaults from Esri as you're designing your homepage. For example, the Groups tab by default has some groups that have been selected by Esri, but they're likely not to have much at all, if anything, to do with your organization. So taking those couple extra steps to configure that Groups tab, what appears in that Groups gallery, is always a really good idea. And the same goes for the gallery tab. That's a place where you want to put your best foot forward by displaying a custom gallery of your best content rather than just let it default. So complete your homepage by adding additional things as desired, like links to your hub sites or open data sites, your city website, and so forth. So it's a great place to begin your visitor experience or your member experience. Now, with the June 2020 release of ArcGIS Online, we introduced a new homepage editor. And the editor is really intended to deliver a homepage that's both secure and responsive across all devices. Now, if you haven't yet moved to the new editor and have been an existing user for a while, you can still access the classic homepage authoring tools. Now, I know that with the classic homepage authoring tools, many of you have used some custom HTML and CSS to do some interesting things. But with the new homepage editor, custom HTML is no longer supported, and that's for very good reasons. That's to provide a secure and also a very responsive page. But there's still lots of customization options, so I don't think you'll find any of that limiting. Now, once you move over to the new homepage editor, the classic editor is no longer available. And if you're a new organization, you never saw the classic editor, all you really see is this new homepage editor. And this continues to evolve with every release of ArcGIS Online. Now, with the latest ArcGIS Online release just prior to this conference, there are some new and enhanced design capabilities, including color schemes and typography. So we encourage you to move forward with the new editor if you haven't done so already. Now, a really interesting thing you can do is you can use sharing to control what visitors see. So the public can see, of course, publicly shared items when they visit your website. But only after signing in can organization or group only shared items be visible to members. So on the left here, I have a public display of my lab's website. On the right is what I see when I log in. So you can see there's some extra clickable buttons and some extra things that I can see when I sign into the organization. And by using this technique, you can really create some interesting experience for all visitors, whether they're public or whether they're for members of your organization. Now, along with editing the look and feel of your homepage, you can also edit and modify the navigation bars, and that's the tabs along the top of your homepage, which include home, gallery, map, scene, and groups. Now, you can omit some of those tabs. You can remove some from public view, or you can reveal tabs based on privileges. So, for example, the map tab might only be available to members signed in that have privileges for map authoring. Now, all of this is set by the organization administrator, and that's in the settings, general navigation bar settings, which is shown on the right. And again, avoid the defaults and customize this for your organization. And when you do display a gallery or groups tab, make sure that that's not the Esri default content. Make sure it's your best content that you can take advantage of. Now, another interesting thing that you can do when you're working with your homepage is in the security section of the organization settings, you can configure an information banner as well as an access notice. And I've got a couple of examples there. The access notices can be set with either an OK button or an accept or decline. And the notices appear at the top of all pages when people navigate through your organization. So these are really good to announce new content or perhaps maintenance about to happen and so forth. So they're great to deliver messages about various things that you want to have visitors know about. Now, while you can make your homepage your primary destination, there's lots of other destinations, really great destinations that you can create. So these can be hub, you can use Experience Builder to build destinations, and there's other sort of mini destinations that you can create, like group-based galleries, ArcGIS story maps collections, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes. And you can also do things like embed components of your organization, your maps and galleries into your website as well. So there's lots of ways to create interesting destinations and also to utilize what you have there in your organization in different ways. So what you create or what destinations you make is really up to you, and it really depends on how best you decide to serve the varying audiences that you want to reach. So in practice, I think what happens is that you're going to end up with several destinations that you'll create to reach all your constituents and all of your stakeholders. Now, a good practice is that you cross-link these destinations so that they can be cross-discovered. For example, link your hub to your homepage and vice versa. And it's also a really good idea to maintain a cohesive style and branding experience across all of your destinations. So using the same color scheme, similar looking look and feels and thumbnails and so forth. So let's take a look at a few of these. And let me bring over a browser window and let's take a look at some examples of some homepage destinations which I've chosen because I think they're good. Now, this first one here is from the city of Seattle, and right away when we open it, I think it's a very nice looking homepage. It appeals to me. It looks professional. There's some introductory text. It also includes a link. And then there's some interesting things that the city has wanted me to take a look at or highlight in my initial experience. So we've got a nice little row of cards with some interesting applications that I can open. I have some links to the Seattle geodata site and so forth. Now, if we look at the top, let's see how they've done with managing their groups. They've decided in this case to leave all of the default navigation tabs visible. So let's check out the groups here. And it looks like here in this case, they've kept the Esri defaults, which I don't necessarily think are essential, but they have added one of their own groups. So they have done some customization here to tune it to their organization. Let's take a look at their gallery. And you can see the gallery probably could use a little curation, in my humble opinion. I'm not trying to point out fault, but right away I see there's a missing thumbnail here, and these are probably just the most used or relevant items in the organization. Now, you can control this and configure this specifically, and I'd recommend going ahead and doing that to take control over this. Now let's take a look at the next homepage that I've selected, and this is Faribault County, Minnesota. What I like about this page is it definitely has a unique style. It has definitely a recognizable brand, and they've used a certain graphic style to emphasize that brand. So it's a clean looking homepage with some strong branding. Let's take a look at their groups tab. And again, they've let it default to the Esri defaults. And an improvement I might suggest is they can take control of this and do something different. But what they have done here is they've really taken an opportunity to present their best content forward in the gallery. So they've done a really good job with this gallery tab. Let's take a look at the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And they've adopted a very distinctive, but yet very easy to recognize style. And what I like about this is that it's very consistent. They've also done a really good job in the Groups tab by sort of taking control over that and eliminating the Esri default groups and just adding their own resources. And I highly recommend this as something that you should do. They've also done a really good job in their gallery. So they've created their own gallery full of things that they think are important for people to see. And again, it's that very distinctive brand and style, which really clearly marks their content as different from any others. Let's take a look at Chatham County. Now, I chose Chatham County because they're leveraging the little notification at the top. So it looks like their latest 2021 aerial imagery is now available. And it's a nice little advertisement, a nice little heads up as to something new that's happened in the site. You can see they also use a very distinctive graphic-based branding style, which is really nice and really good. Let's move on and take a look at the National Park Service. And I chose the National Park Service because what they have is an information notice. So they have a notice, probably because they're a federal government agency, about some privacy. They also have some warnings and a few other things that they've listed. Now, this appears on the first time that you visit the site. If you accept, then it won't appear if you visit it until the cookies are cleared. If you decline, then you actually can't go beyond this notice. So they've chosen an accept decline, and you have to accept to continue forward. And there's also another type of notice where you just click OK to move on. And there's their homepage, a very nice and attractive site with some nice images there. All right. Another type of destination is a hub, and I've chosen a couple of hubs here to showcase. You can go to hub.arcgis.com to see sort of a catalog of very interesting ones. This is Virginia Department of Transportation. They have a very nice immersive experience. They have some things that they want me to see right away. I can click and open up a gallery of story maps here. So this is a really good way using a hub to show me some content that they want me to see right off the bat. It's nicely designed, looks very attractive, and again, lends some credence to this organization and the work that they do. And finally, let's take a look at one more hub, and this is from FEMA. And FEMA's done some really, really interesting things. They're a very large organization with lots of different regions, and they've used this hub to sort of bring all those people together. They have a very attractive website here, and with topics of interest that I can hover and click on to learn more about. They've got a series of assets which can be discovered easily, which deal with safety and security and communications and so forth. And they have some nice cards here, and including a live map, which lets me view some things here. So, okay, looks like there's an issue with one of the layers. No good deed goes unpunished, I should say. So again, if you're pushing something out there publicly, it's wise to check in every now and then and make sure that everything is working as advertised. If I had yet another critique, I'd add maybe a view larger link to maybe open this up in a larger window. So a couple of things we might consider to improve, but the really nice thing that they've done is they've sort of brought all their regions together here by having destinations for all of the different regions. Each of these opens up the region hub, so it's a great way to bring together resources from lots of different areas. All righty. With that, let's move on and continue on to the next section. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about here is about establishing your brand. And a brand is a really valuable thing, as Apple knows, as Esri knows, and as BMW knows. It's an easily identifiable link to who you are and what you represent. So a successful brand becomes associated with a level of credibility and quality. And the logos that I've displayed here certainly are good examples of that. They're recognizable, and they carry weight, and they carry meaning. Now, organization branding is something I really advocate, and it can take many different forms. And a reason we might want to brand things is, well, for example, if I was a user in Utah, I would know that the Utah AGRC, the Automated Geographic Reference Center, is the statewide source for foundational information across the state. Yet, if I was just looking for authoritative content for Utah, I'm likely not to know that. So how do I, cruising around ArcGIS online, how do I determine what I can use and trust? Well, I do that first by the looks, by appearance, and also by the profile. So not knowing other things, these are the only ways for me to make a decision about what's authoritative and what is not. So a brand is really important in establishing credibility and an easy to recognize presence. And each of the examples shown here represents visual branding, an easy to recognize presence. And I know right away, just by looking, where it's coming from and whether or not I can trust, and whether or not it's good content. Now, another technique that I strongly advocate is that you take one of your user accounts and you turn that into an organizational profile. In other words, create a profile that represents your organization rather than an individual, and then move your top tier, your most used, your best content under the ownership of that account. So this is a easy way to kind of put your best foot forward in terms of content, and also by completing the profile for that organizational account, you can send people to your website, contact information, and things like that. And in this case, the city of Minneapolis has done a very good job of doing that. Now, here's another example from Michigan DNR. And they also include some very strong branding through easy to recognize distinctive thumbnails. So these are easy to find out amongst the crowd of things you might find in ArcGIS Online. And once you associate this with Michigan DNR, you know at a glance how to find it and which content you might think to use first. So let's talk about thumbnails a little bit. So over the years, thinking about what makes for a good thumbnail has evolved. Now, Esri used to provide what we called solution templates to create organization branded thumbnails that included things like the item type and lots of other words. Now, these days, and mostly because of the different sizes that all of these thumbnails are used in the ArcGIS Online ecosystem and the different ways these appear on devices, less text is considered much better. And the use of easy to recognize graphics rather than small logos with text that is difficult to read is also encouraged. So I personally like and recommend large, easy to recognize logos that are simple and therefore good for all sizes that the thumbnails will be seen in and used in throughout the ArcGIS Online ecosystem. But what you should adopt is really what's essential for your brand and for identifying your content. Details like what kind of file it is or what kind of data it represents can also be discovered in the item description and may not really be necessary. Also, if you created items a long while ago, it's definitely time to update to the new size standard. The old standard used to be 200 by 133 pixels. Now it's 600 by 400. So get those older ones updated to the larger size because they'll just look better. And I also recommend using PNGs. That's a strong tip there. PNGs, regardless of what size they're displayed at in the ecosystem, always look the best to me and are always the crispest. Now you can set the status for any content you author or create within your organization, and that's either authoritative or deprecated. There's a little status toggle that you can choose to mark your content. So your best content or content building blocks that you want others to use can be designated as authoritative. And that displays that little authoritative badge and also pushes it to the top in terms of search. Deprecated pushes them to the bottom of search and also clearly marks those items as deprecated and something to avoid. So members in your organization can search by the status, but that authoritative status is only searchable within your organization until you take the next step. And the next step is you can verify your organization with Esri customer service. And once you're verified, any public items that are marked as authoritative will display the organization name as the item owner and also the authoritative badge. So individuals that contribute to the organization will still be displayed under the Manage By line, but still this puts that authoritative badge out in the ArcGIS Online ecosystem for others to find. It also pushes them to the top of search, making it really easy for anyone to find your organization information. Now you can see I've clicked on the owner name here, Iowa Department of Transportation, and instead of seeing an individual profile, we have options to go to the home page or to the gallery. And again, these are other really good reasons to have a really good looking home page and a really well curated gallery. All right, let's take a look at some of these examples here in this section. All right, so here what I've done is from my organization, I've just searched for Utah. And I could probably be more specific, but I'm just looking in general for things I might find interesting about Utah. And you can see already I'm making some judgments. This, I'm not even reading anything, but I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that's not even a thumbnail. This thumbnail looks a little unfinished, shall we say. So right away, those might not be things that I'm drawn to. Another check that I might do is I might see who authored these. And again, I'm not meaning to pick on anyone, and some people, because of their organization, cannot display their profile publicly, but this doesn't give me really a lot of information to go on. So I might avoid this content just because there might be better that I can identify. And indeed, as I scroll down, I see this thumbnail draws me in right away just because it seems to be from a really well curated source. In other words, the person has taken some extra time. If I click on the user profile here, I see that they have adopted that, what I suggested earlier, by taking one of their user accounts and making it the account that manages the best organization content. So I can learn more about the organization. And when I open up the profile, I see it's really nicely done. I've got some good contact information, and I have a very appealing gallery of things that are displayed here. Now, I can tell by looking at the top, the default in a profile gallery is that the top items are displayed based on relevance. Now you can control this and you can specify specific content to display in your profile gallery, and that's what I recommend. This user got really lucky here because they've done a really good job of making really great thumbnails for all of their content. So it looks really, really nice. Let's consider another search here. In this case, I'm searching for Iowa. And again, I'm making some judgment calls based upon what I see. I can also come here to status and search for authoritative content. And once I do, I can see the Iowa authoritative content. That badge is now publicly displayed because they've registered with Esri customer service and been verified. They use a very distinctive style of branding. It's a graphic style. I can identify that pretty easily. When I click on the owner, I see who they are, and I can visit their homepage, which is a nicely crafted homepage with that very distinctive graphic style. And I can also visit their gallery. And again, here the Iowa DOT has done a really good job of having a nice custom gallery, putting their best foot forward. So a couple of different examples, both using an organizational account and also by verifying your organization and getting that authoritative badge pushed up to the top. All right, now let's talk a little bit about groups. And groups actually are the building blocks for your organization. They organize your content, and they also organize people within your organization. And they're the building blocks for foundational elements like your base map gallery, your public gallery, your featured content, and so forth. Groups are also a sort of a mini destination for members as they sign in. So you can pre-assign members to certain groups, and when you do, make sure that they find things that they can begin working with and begin using. There's kind of nothing like being invited to a group, and when you go there, there's nothing there. So if you're doing that, make sure that the welcome mat is out, and there's some really good items there for people to begin doing their work. Groups are also a place for collaboration, not only within your organization, but also between organizations. And with the last couple of releases, we've introduced some capabilities that allow group collaboration across organizations. And you can go in the help topic there and read a little bit more about that. But that's a very important, powerful, and also new capability in ArcGIS Online. Now, documenting your group is like documenting an item. A good thumbnail, description, and summary are always essential. And for your key groups, always set delete protection so you don't accidentally get rid of them in some type of a house cleaning, accidental house cleaning. And also think about the membership options. There's a bunch of those, and you can make a group private. You can make a group by invitation only. You can make a group available so that people, if they find it, can petition to join the group and so forth. And you can also control who can contribute content. So there's lots of nuances in how you can set up the membership and how the dynamics of the group work. So pay attention to those and see how things can be configured to do the best for what you want to accomplish. Now, what I like to do is I like to use visual cues to help keep my sanity as organization administrator. And after a while, you're going to find lots of groups that you might need to keep track of. So what I tend to do is I use a visual cue. I use certain colors. I use certain graphic styles to indicate things like, oh, these are the foundation groups for my base map gallery and featured maps gallery and so forth, or these are collaboration groups and so forth. On top of using colors, I also use text. So I alphabetize things so that things kind of tend to form in groups, and which makes it easier for me to recognize and find them both by the graphic design and also by the order that they appear. So that's a handy technique, especially as your organizations grow. This might be a real time saver and help keep things sane for you. Now, just like maps, there are configurable apps for groups that can be used to present group content. And these work directly from the items in the group, which makes it really nice as you add things. So you don't have to reconfigure the app. New items just automatically appear as soon as they are pushed into the group. So that's a very handy feature about these group-based gallery applications. Now, one thing I also wanted to talk about is these new ArcGIS story maps collections. And these do not work off of a group, but yet they're for more than just story maps. They're really nice and elegant. You can choose from a different couple of designs for those, and you can put any items that you have in your organization into these story maps collection, of course, as well as any stories that you build. So I wanted to highlight this as another opportunity for you to share and create some destinations. Let's take a look at a few of these here. All right, so the first application I'd like to show is actually one of my favorites. This is called the Category Gallery, and it's one of the group-based galleries that you can create. Now, what I like about this is that you can create categories which you can use to enable people to search for specific things. And these categories are custom, in this case, within the group. You can have organization level categories, and you can use those in the category gallery. But in this case, I've created categories specific for this group of content. And this was actually part of a bunch of content that I curated during the COVID response. And we were looking for assets that could be shared, that could be used by, say, for example, people building ArcGIS dashboards or people working with ArcGIS Insights. So as things came into the group, I would assign those items a certain category. And then even as we got the idea for the need for new categories, I could assign them on the fly to the group, and then I could categorize items. Other neat thing is that items can be categorized in multiple categories, so you can place them in different spots throughout the category gallery, making them really super easy to find. Now, the way that was managed, and I'm going to sign in here to the disaster response program group. And I'll show you behind the scenes how I managed to do this, if I remember my login. All right. So within this organization, I created a group. And the group in that organization is the one where all of the COVID content that we wanted to publish through the category gallery appeared. So you can see there's quite a lot of it here that we ended up with. There are hundreds and hundreds of these that we put here. And within this group, as things were added, again, I'm using a visual cue to easily find that. This was the group that contained all those items. And if I view all group content, you can see in the left here, here's the group categories. And I can click the pencil to add or delete or add subcategories at any time. So it's really easy to create these within your group. As items are added, I just went ahead and categorized them. And you can see this one has been categorized under all, it's been categorized for educators, and also categorized under ArcGIS Story Map. So you can assign items multiple categories, which is a really great way to leverage these in multiple different ways. Okay, let's move on from the category gallery. There's also another one called Minimal Gallery, which is also very good, which you should check out. Now we're looking at a story maps collection, and this is using the default interface. This is a collection of story maps, and most of these are story maps, but it's a really great way to package these up. So this is a story map that tells us about rural engagement in the Indiana uplands and so forth. To get back to the main page, here's the collection overview, and you can kind of browse these and navigate through. Once you open one, something you can configure at the top is a little arrow that lets you move from this to the next element in the collection. Now, recently and in beta right now, there's some new designs, and I find these really compelling. So this is one that the Story Maps team did, which is a collection of story maps about living in the age of humans. And these are really interesting stories, and they're collected together here really nicely in this very aesthetic, very compelling way. So this is a strong way to bring lots of different content together, especially your stories, and let people browse and discover that and make that more shareable. So again, none of these that I've shown here actually have other types of ArcGIS Online items, but you can put any item in a story maps collection. And with that, let's move on to my final section. This is about member best practices. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is profile. So profiles tell others who you are, whether within your organization or publicly if you share public content. And they're also part of any discoverable item and also deliver access to your groups and your items. So it's important to pay attention to some of these details, because now more than ever, with the introduction of these new profile capabilities, this new profile design, all of your stuff, warts and all, is really easy to discover, but you can take control of that and present just your best items rather than everything. So we recommend that you do that. So pay extra attention to what can be discovered. Now, in terms of the bio, I think these are good examples of profile bios. Some are kind of minimal, some are a little more involved, but they all tell me who the person is, what their role is within the organization, and even a little bit about what their organization does. Now, Stephanie's over on the right, she actually, I noticed today during the closing session that she won a couple of awards in the map gallery. So congratulations to Stephanie. She's actually one of my favorite users that I highlight often. She's with the Grand Canyon Trust. So she not only tells me who she is, but she also tells me a little bit about Grand Canyon Trust, and to reinforce the branding of herself as an authoritative member of that organization, she also uses the Grand Canyon Trust logo instead of a picture of herself. So that's a good practice. Now, this example shows a good user profile. It's got good personal information, and it's enough to establish some credibility and also information about this person's role in the organization. It also has consistency in thumbnails. So all in all, it's a nice professional look. Now, I mentioned a new capability is that you can configure what items are displayed when someone clicks on your profile. The default is the top items by relevance, which is what this user has chosen, and in this case is just fine. But I recommend that you explicitly configure the items that are displayed to showcase your best work. Now, here's a really good example, and this one is using an organizational profile. Again, that profile has been set aside for the organization's best content. So it's got some really good information about who the organization is, and I see a lot of consistency and a lot of really good practice here in having some really great thumbnails, and this just tells me, it shows me sort of a sense of professionalism, and I expect the content that I find that this account maintains is of the best quality. Now, here's another example. This is actually one of my favorite user organizations, Utah Sitla. And here in their item gallery, they've just let the gallery show the default, the top items based on relevance. But there's a couple of thumbnails there which are incongruous. So this profile, I think, comes close to being great, but you can see a couple of little changes that could easily be overcome if they had taken the extra step or two to configure this display of their items with their profile themselves. Now, this is a new feature and not many people are aware of it, so it's something to keep in mind as you evolve your profile. And now thumbnails. Now, lots of time we're just hurrying to get things done or working on something very transient, but it only takes a quick second to make a better thumbnail. A thumbnail is often the first way we judge the content behind it, and all of these thumbnails scream, "Don't use me, stay away." They show a lack of curation and follow through, so already I wouldn't trust the content that's behind these. So a good friend who is an accomplished guitar player once told me that guitars that didn't stay in tune were woofers. And indeed, these thumbnails are definitely woofers, since they tell me the content behind them isn't in tune with trustworthy, well-crafted content. So there's a couple of techniques you can use to make better thumbnails. It's really easy to make them now by editing each item thumbnail, and you can use location hints. Just set your map, what's captured, to the location that will give an indication of what your content might be about. You can also use graphics to provide some image or graphic hints about weather or construction, COVID, and so forth. So these are easy hints to come up with. There's also content hints. By showing a little bit of the content, we know that one's about traffic, one's going to be a spreadsheet, one's going to be some type of a file, and one's going to be about perhaps elevation or drainage. So these content hints are useful. And of course, you can also combine them by including a little bit of branding with content hints or just sticking with your branding. So these are all good examples, and really it's up to you and your style that you want to adopt. And as I say, no job is completely finished until the paperwork is done. And in this case, a really good item description needs to be created for everything that you do. And that includes a good thumbnail, a concise summary, a great description, credits, and more. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. And let's open these and consider them. Okay, in this case, this was Wendy's, and I've searched by owner Wendy at E.O. Wilson. And again, I can click and I can learn a little bit more about her. Here's her profile. And again, it opens up, and Wendy has chosen to let the default order or the default items show up here. But because she's done a really good job of having great thumbnails, this looks very cohesive and looks very good. In this case, we're looking at that DVR PC GIS profile. And again, I can view their profile, and they've let it default to the items by relevance. But again, they've done such a good job in having great item thumbnails that this is fine. Notice also that any of the groups that you own will also be one click away from discovery. So this is, and they've done a really great job here by using some really good group graphics. So again, your stuff is very visible now, so it's worthwhile paying a little bit of attention to see what's going on. Here's Utah Sitla, and they've got a really good organization account here, and I can view not only all of their groups, and they've done a real good job of that, but I can also view their profile and their items. Again, perhaps a slight chance for improvement by maybe just choosing selected items instead of displaying all. And finally, let's take a look at a really great example of a very well documented item. And this is by Diana, who will be taking over here shortly. And this is just beautiful. It's got a great title, tells me exactly what's going on. The summary is really, really good. It's authoritative, which means that this is managed by an organization Diana belongs to called Urban Observatory. But even though it's managed by Urban Observatory, there's Diana. So I can view her profile and I can learn more information about her. I can also look at her items, and Diana always does a really amazing job with all of her thumbnails, and she's one of the best at doing that. So we can look at all the great content. But this item is really neat because it includes what I can expect, the types of information that might be there, and including links for additional information. So that's a really good example of a very well documented item. So with that, I think I'm going to turn things over to Matt, and we'll see if we can take some questions. Again, you can go to the Extend the Reach of Your GIS book and look at it. It's online by going to go.esri.com/extend. Okay, we have a question from Anonymous who asks, where can you configure public versus private home pages? Okay, public versus private home pages aren't configured separately. When you place things into a home page, if they're public, when an anonymous visitor visits the home page, they'll be seen. If they're not public and they're shared only within your organization or only to certain members within certain groups, then until that person signs in at the home page, those won't be visible. Okay. Right, a question from Anonymous. In the Chatham County example, where they have the green info banner at the top, is it possible to have two banners, one for the public and one for the members inside the AGL organization? At this point in time, there's no opportunity for two banners, but that's a really good enhancement request. There are some other ways that you can message people from the administrative console within your organization, so that might be a good way to reach out to people. But on the homepage, title up on the top, there is only one, and it's always publicly visible to everyone. Or if you've only shared your organization internally, if you don't expose it publicly, then it would only be available to people after they sign in.
Okay. Jessica White asks, when creating an ArcGIS hub, a new AGL organization is created with a new AGL homepage. How would you recommend managing these two organizational homepages?
Well, so I'm assuming that Jesse is referring to Hub Premium, and a hub is free and it's part of any organization, and I highly recommend kind of at least kicking the tires on that to see what it can do for you. When you move up to Hub Premium, you actually get sort of, think of it as a shadow organization behind your organization. It's a great place where people can come, bring their own accounts. They can sign in with whatever you permit them to, a Google account or something. So they become known. They're not entirely anonymous. They're known, but yet they don't have to be managed or administered with the other members of your organization. The homepage for that actually is not discoverable. It's kind of behind your organization homepage, but both the organization hub and your organization homepage, it might be a good idea to think about cross-linking those and also adopting similar look and feels. I hope I answered that correctly. If not, go ahead and send another question in.
Okay. Anonymous asks, for public-facing AGL homepages, when will we be able to disable the search function so that our organization's content, for example, feature layers, is not accessible?
So I'm trying to get my head around what the requirements are here. So if your organizational content is public, it's always accessible one way or another, just because you've shared it public. If there's content you do not want to make accessible, then you only share it within your organization. Now you can take that content and expose it in apps that are more public facing, but in general, if your content is public, if your items are public, then it's discoverable one way or another throughout the ecosystem. And jump in, Diana, if you have anything to add here.
Sure.
Okay. So I think this was in reference to the consistency of thumbnails. Someone commented, you can't always judge a book by its cover. Some of us don't have limitless amounts of staff and money. And
that's very true and appreciated. So I actually, I'm the pot calling the kettle black here. I'm actually not so careful in my organization. What I recommend that you do is, first, it's easy to create a decent thumbnail just by using the thumbnail editor. So what it allows you to do is it opens up your map or your item, and you can kind of position it at least in an area that would give a cue as to where it is. If you want to take it to the next level and do that branding, add your logo or add some graphics, yes, that does take a bunch of extra work. And because of that, I don't recommend that you try to do that for all of your items. What I would recommend that you consider doing that for is just your top tier, your very best items, your maps, your apps, and just pick out the 10 or 12 or whatever of those that are the best, brand those heavily, and then add them to your organization gallery page, or put them in a group which will be discovered in your organization. So that way you don't really have to spend a lot of time doing this, and you can just apply it to just your very best content. That's what I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's for a web map, there's a really easy button to create a thumbnail directly from the map itself.
Okay, a question from Anonymous. Our web team pushes back when we want to put a story map or other AGL item into our CMS website. The reason they have hesitancy is that the content of the story map does not show up in the search results for our site. Is there anything we can do to remedy this? Okay, so the story map actually will show up in the search results for your
for your site. Even on the left-hand side, if you look down on the left, you can search specifically for story maps. Now, this wasn't true with the classic story maps. They just got lumped into apps in general. But with the new story maps, they actually are categorized differently, and you can search specifically for those. Now, by default, when you make a story map, the item page that's created is pretty minimal. And the more that the author of the story can add to that item page, it also makes it more discoverable within the organization. And also you can do things like give it an authoritative badge, use certain keywords, categorize it. Those are ways that you can elevate the story maps, but they are discoverable in your organization. You can also do things like create an organizational group where all those story maps go in, and you can make that like a one-stop destination so others can find them.
Okay, I think they were referring to when they embed it in their website, when they embed an Esri app or web map in their website.
Okay, one thing that I think is going to come to the rescue then for you is that the Story Maps team has taken some great lengths to improve Google Analytics within Story Maps. So you might want to take a look at that, and that might be a good way to get those things earmarked with, even though they're embedded in other contexts.
Okay. Let's see, a question. We have layers that we use in many of our public apps, and we also want to include those same layers in our open data portal. Do you recommend that we create a view of those layers specifically for open data so that they can have their own consistent look?
Well, you mentioned the word view, and view is a really important construct within ArcGIS Online. It's like a database view. So a view works off of a source, let's say a feature layer. And what it actually does is it creates a tightly coupled feature layer, but that feature layer can have different permissions. So maybe within your organization or to certain organization members, you can have a feature layer that's editable or that can be used in field apps, but in your public facing maps and apps, you can have a view that is not editable. So views are a very powerful and important thing to check out. And there's some really good blog articles on that, and I recommend that. I've lost track of the rest of the question now, Matt, so maybe you can pick up the pieces and refresh my memory.
Do you recommend that we create a view of those layers specifically for open data so that they can have their own consistent look?
And I think it's really up to you. Open data provides some additional capabilities on those feature layers and other sources like download and things like that. Maps are just openable and people can do things with them, but I don't think it's necessary to do that, but you might want to just experiment a little bit just to see what works best with your particular goals in mind.
Okay. Another question, is there a way to save favorite owners in ArcGIS Online?
To save favorite owner. So of course you can favorite things that you find and that you like. And I'm thinking what this question is about is I really like all the work that Diana has done. How do I always go back and find her stuff, right? And well, I mean, one way is you could just make a browser bookmark. That could be one way to do that. There's no specific way to favor within the ArcGIS Online ecosystem a particular owner, but you can use other outside the ecosystem ways to kind of bookmark and go back to those when you want to.
Okay. Another question, why not use SVG thumbnails if they are not really thumbnails in the traditional sense anyway?
Well, that's a good question. More and more, we're looking at incorporating SVG across the platform, and I think it's just an evolutionary thing. So we started off just with little screen captures, 200 by 133. Now we're evolving that. We're thinking about doing some other things to make it easier to do your organizational branding on your thumbnail. So those are all kind of works in progress and all things that we're thinking about.
Okay, Lily Wydra says one recommendation to customize thumbnails would be to enable users to publish as a batch a logo or a small image in the corner of the thumbnail or a user's chosen location. Can't wait for this feature.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I've actually been talking to the team about in the settings for the organization, you can actually set a color scheme right now, and even a little logo that will be picked up by any applications that you write. So one of the things that we've talked about is maybe there's another section in there where you put your, you know, your branding, your logo, words, or whatever, and that can automatically be applied. So that's something that's under consideration.
Okay. Someone asks, can you provide blog references for views?
Yes. Let me get back and answer that, but you can go to ArcGIS or blogs.arcgis.com, and if you search for views, you'll find it there. Also from the help kind of consolidates all of the available resources. It's not only help documentation, but it also includes blogs and learn lessons and things like that. And I do believe there are some Learn ArcGIS lessons specific to views. So even just searching the help for views would get you a list of information.
Okay. Did we want to move into Diana's portion of the presentation now? And
please do. These questions are getting
yeah.
too hard for me. I need a break.
All right, take it away, Diana.
All right. Let me know if you're able to see this.
I can see it.
All right. So Bern talked a lot about the administration, creating your brand. I'm going to now talk about your information products that your organization is making with ArcGIS Online maps, apps, and how to share these great things. All right, so building successful web maps and apps have many different steps. They're not always a linear process of, you know, step one, choose your base map, step two, do this. No. It's a constantly evolving thing in which you're always asking yourself, what am I trying to convey here? Is my data prepared in a way that will allow me to do that? If not, Arcade can help to manipulate your data as you're working, but that's often one of the first steps is the source evaluation / data prep and publishing that layer. Then you move on to mapping your data and symbolizing, which is where we have a lot of fun with smart mapping, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But with that, at the same time that you're symbolizing, you're probably also going to work on your pop-up. And the pop-up is what really comes through. That's the #1 way that people are going to be interacting with your web map is through that pop-up. And that comes through in a lot of the instant apps and dashboards and hub sites and story maps, things like that. And as you're configuring that app, you're probably going back and forth, tweaking the symbology, possibly adding labels, all these little details that help you build successful web maps and apps. And now it's Thursday afternoon of this conference, so there have been entire sessions on some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, but I just want to give you a small taste of what's possible in ArcGIS Online. The first amazing thing is smart mapping. And smart mapping is intelligence built into ArcGIS Online in terms of the mapping experience. There's all different types of mapping styles or drawing styles, as we like to call them. And I'll go through some of the most popular ones here, not all of these, but we also point you to a lot of resources in that ebook for a lot of these. Now, what smart mapping does is it starts you off with really data-driven and intelligent defaults as the starting place. So already out of the gate, you're getting a decent map. It's up to you as the GIS analyst to go beyond those defaults and apply your knowledge. And then if you're an ArcGIS an online administrator, you can help your team out by making sure you've suggested base maps, for example. What are the default base maps that your team has to choose from. You can configure that. Or what's the default extent that your mapping area opens to? If I'm a county, I always want it to be showing my own county. And so making sure that that type of thing is standard across your organization. All right, so great maps are then the foundation for great apps. And we've got story maps, which, like I mentioned, I'm sure you've seen by now since it's day 4 of this conference. Here's an example about one about ocean plastics. And then focused apps, which I'll talk about something very new and exciting called instant apps. And then, of course, dashboards. From within the new map viewer, it is one click away to any of these things. If you're configuring your web map, you've made it the way you want, people are going to be interacting with it. You click on share maps and you can share it into an instant app, a story map, or a dashboard right then and there. What are instant apps, you might be asking? They are different templates that all have focused user experiences. So nearby, for example, is one that allows users to search nearby and find out what's around them. Portfolio is one that allows people to toggle through a bunch of maps. It's very easy to make different experiences using the same web map or a similar web map that you've just tweaked something for a little bit with using a different instant app. So I'll show you in just a minute when I go into the demo section. This was a very similar web map, one using the minimalist template and one using nearby, and it gives a total different experience. All right, so now I'm going to move over. And I'm not as smooth as Bern was on this, I apologize. All right, so smart mapping. All right, so let me go through some of those more popular smart mapping styles so that you just get a sense of what's possible here. This one is the style color and size. So the color here is showing the percentage of households with no vehicle in this case, and the size is showing the magnitude, the count of households with no vehicle, all in one map. This is in Baltimore, and with pop-ups, even though there are attributes in this data set that are not being mapped necessarily, they can still come through in the pop-up. So for example, here, we have a breakdown by household size. And we see that most households without a vehicle tend to be these one-person households. And that's true in Baltimore, that's true in many, many cities, is that the most common type of household without a car is a one-person household. And so this allows you to bring in other attributes that maybe don't make it into your map symbology, but can make it into the maps pop-up and give your users and your viewers some additional information, some additional way to interact with that web map. So this is color and size. Another example of color and size, now on a dark base map, we have where are mobile homes or manufactured homes. Again, we've got the color being the percent and the size being the count. Now, I want to show you some really cool new color ramps in this, this new map viewer. So here, there we go. All right, so I talked about how this one is on a dark base map, and that's why we started with a dark ending point, and then it gets bright at the end here. we've got we've got color ramps that are specifically designed for dark backgrounds. With web maps, it's totally different from print maps where ink is involved. Here we've got light coming through a computer screen. And so these dark base maps have been really popular. And we've designed specific color ramps that allow you to have really, really bright maps. We also have all kinds of color blind friendly ramps as well, if that's something that's important to your organization, making more accessible and checking for colorblind friendly. The ramps are already tagged that way. They're also tagged by color if that's important to you. But one really nice thing about the new map viewer is all these new color ramps and the way that they are specifically tagged to match up with the base map itself. So moving on from color and size, I want to show you just color this time, but this is called above and below. And here we have a map titled, "Is a 40-hour work week normal?" And you might be asking, well, what's so magical about 40 hours? That is a critical value. That's where you're considered full-time. It's often where you get benefits if you're lucky enough to get benefits. And so there's a hard policy associated with 40 hours. Sometimes you might have to get overtime approved if you work over 40. So with that hard cutoff, our map ought to also have a hard color cutoff here. So this style above and below is really great at anchoring your map around these critical values. Let's go into it here. It's buffering. Okay. You'll notice too that 40 is in white. And so because that's not what we want to draw our attention to, we want to draw our attention to those extremes where something is really highly above 40 or really strongly below 40. Those two get the brightest value or the brightest color because they've got the most extreme value in this mapping style. And so you'll see a whole bunch of color ramps here. If you're doing this on a dark base map, you'll notice that there are above and below color ramps that have black or dark gray in the center so that those values that are close to what you're anchoring your map on fade into the base map, just like they do here with the light one with 40. And now you'll notice that the average in this data set at the county level is actually 39.4. So that is originally where smart mapping set the average to, or that middle value to. But I know that actually 40 is what's more interesting. So I was able just really quickly to slide it up, slide it down, type in 40, and it's just so easy to explore. You get that instant feedback in your map as you're deciding on some of these values. All right, another mapping style that I really like is called relationship style. And this allows you not to map two attributes like count and percent, but two different percentages that are somehow related to one another. And so here we've got households who spend over 30% of their income on housing, which is a HUD definition of what's considered burdensome housing costs. And then we've broken it up in this relationship style by owners and renters, because there are totally different policy options available to how we're going to deal with the problem of burdensome housing for owners and renters. And yes, we are interested in where it's high for both in this very dark red color, but we might actually be interested in the off diagonals where it's owners, not renters, who are likely to have burdensome housing costs, or vice versa, in this purple here for renters. So this relationship style shows us where it's high for both, low for both, but also the off diagonals, which I really enjoy about relationship mapping style. And it's so easy to do when you just pick two attributes and you can go to town. There was a session on Tuesday all about smart mapping that goes into this in a lot more detail. I'm breezing through it here. What if you want to map more than 2 attributes? Maybe you have 4 attributes that are related to one another. Well, then there's a style called predominance mapping. And what I really like about predominance mapping is that I don't have to make 4 side-by-side maps and present them to someone and hope that they can squint and see all 4 relationships and patterns and, you know, overwhelm them. No, I'm just going to put that all in one map. And here we've got the most common children's living arrangement in DC. And the pop-ups here show the colors that are associated with this type of living arrangement. I'll show you in a second here. Here we've got the most common is married couple households. So that's that yellow color that you're seeing at 47%. But you'll notice it's not quite as dark yellow as some of these neighboring ones. That's because right below it is 46.8%. So it's just barely making it into this yellow yellow category. So now if I click one of these that's super bright yellow, you'll see that it's much more, 93% is the percentage of children here that are in married couple households. So that strength of predominance is coming through in the transparency used. All right, and then there are tracts where the most common type of living arrangement for children is cohabiting couples. So that's this is a way to map more than 2 attributes in the same map. All right, and now if you've got predominance maps, building on this concept of predominance with multiple attributes at once, if there's a natural order to them, in this case there are, you can have your color ramp also have a natural order to it the way that this one does. Households with no vehicle, where that is the most predominant type of household, 1 vehicle, 2 vehicles, etc., those colors build on one another. And what I really like about this map is that there are bookmarks here. So I can very easily go from place to place and see how different places of the country are when it comes to vehicle ownership. And I also want to point out that this map and the very first one I showed about Baltimore households with no vehicle, they're made from the same layer. A lot of these layers have dozens of attributes in them, and I'm sure many of the ones that your organizations produce have multiple attributes associated with them in the layer. That layer can then fuel dozens, if not hundreds, of web maps that are about different topics. So here we've got most predominant number of vehicles per household versus that households with no vehicle available. Same layer, different web map. And that's very possible to do. All right, moving right along to the last smart mapping style that I want to talk about today, and that is types or unique symbols. This is great for when you're mapping categorical data. And in fact, if you go into Map Viewer and you choose a string attribute, not a numeric attribute, but a string attribute, types will be the first one that is suggested in ArcGIS Online. So this is when you've got different categories that you want to communicate by color, or if you're using points, maybe you want to communicate it by different shapes, something like that. Now, you'll notice that these two types of green are pretty similar to each other, and that's because I, as the map maker, knew this subject matter. I first got suggested like red and green and pink, totally distinct colors. But I said, as someone who knows something about this subject, I said, no, legal with limits is very similar to legal with no limits. And then states where payday lending in this case is illegal, I want that in a completely different color. So that's why yellow is my illegal category. But the light teal versus dark teal is just whether or not the state has limits. So here in New Mexico, it's legal, and here's the limit, versus in Texas, it's legal and there is no limit. There we go. And a new thing about the new map viewer is that you can dock these pop-ups, which I like to do as well. So that's pretty fun. Moving on from smart mapping now, let's go into creating apps. Okay. All right, I mentioned before that once you've got that web map that's your base, you can very easily share that in an instant app. Here's an example of one that I made about farmers markets in Washington, D.C. And it's symbolized using that type style again, where it's categorical data. And the category that we're mapping is what public assistance benefits are accepted at these farmers markets. And so we can see both SNAP and WIC are accepted, two different benefit programs, or pink is neither one is accepted. Now, if I want information on a particular farmer's market, I've configured my web map in a way that allows this pop-up information to come through in the side panel here. And I just want to point out that the pop-up here pulls information definitely from the layer that the farmers markets uses, but it's also pulling from these very subtle blue dots that are any retailer in the area that accepts SNAP. And here's a list of them. All right, and this is being calculated on the fly using Arcade. So I didn't have to, pre-calculate what retail stores there are right next to this farmer's market that might accept SNAP. Also, layers that aren't even being displayed on this map from Living Atlas are coming through in the pop-up. We're getting poverty level information, we're getting racial and ethnic composition of the area information coming through in the pop-up that I've configured in the web map. So it's possible to not only make different layers within your map talk to one another, but you can pull in information into your map from Living Atlas layers themselves. So let's take another look at one of these, and you'll see that this app allows people to get a district-wide view of the situation of farmers markets in the Washington, D.C. area. It's an instant app called Minimalist. Now, I took this web map, I did save as, I changed the pop-up slightly, and then I threw it into another instant app template called Nearby, and you'll get a totally different experience here. So this is more of a consumer-facing app. I want people to interact with this one, seeing what's close to me. And I can move this down to say, I don't feel like walking a mile. I only want to walk, 0.75 miles maybe. And I'm going to type in an address. Here we go. And we'll see what farmers markets are close to this address here. Or actually, we'll see which ones are within this 0.75 mile radius. There are 3. And the pop-up this time, I configured it to show different attributes, more the stuff that would be of interest to consumers. So the time slot that this farmer's market takes place on, the website of this farmer's market, what goods are available there. These were all attributes in the layer itself. And so I was able to make those come through by configuring the pop-up. And now here's how they look on this public facing app that's a consumer facing app. I don't really need to see all the other stores around. That's good context for like a program manager or a policy maker or someone who wants that district-wide view. That's why I made that other version of this app. But here, very, very easily, just changing the pop-up and putting it into a different instant app template, we have a totally different focused experience. All right. So now what if you want to share multiple apps? Bern mentioned before there is the possibility of putting them into an ArcGIS Online group. That's a great way to share multiple maps and categorize them. There's also the story maps collection, which is great. There's also another way, and that's through instant apps. There's one called Portfolio, which allows you to share related maps, like a map series, or what we like to sometimes call an atlas of related maps. And Portfolio also allows you to add in things like dashboards or hub sites. It doesn't have to be just a web map. You can add in different types of content as well. And this is a great way to just help people browse through your portfolio or your atlas, your map series, whatever the case may be. So that is another instant app that is available to you as well. Within all of these information products that we kind of went through very quickly here, think about what makes the most sense when you're building these information products that are map-based. How are they going to be interacting with your map? How do you need them to consume your map? And then think about what type of information product best supports this. It could be these focused interactive apps that are really easy to do via instant apps. If you're presenting a long narrative or multimedia information alongside it, perhaps a story map makes more sense. If you really want people to get involved in terms of seeing charts and lists and things like that, then possibly a dashboard. Maybe the instant apps are okay, but you need something a little bit more customized, or you really want to tailor fit it to your needs, then a web experience makes the most sense there. And of course, there's always the static print map, even if it's not printed on paper with ink. A PDF version of a map I know is still very popular. From the branding perspective that Bern mentioned in his section, as the ArcGIS Online administrator, you can set up branding colors that will come through in all your teams' instant apps, story maps, and dashboards and things like that, so that they can take advantage of what's called a shared theme. And that's a really great way to save time as the app builder, but also as the org administrator. You have a sense of consistency across all these different information products that your team is building and putting together. It makes it so that you know exactly what color of red is being used on all of them. And it's a great way to, just like I said, save time, build your brand, and do what you need to do. Now, I mentioned before with that consumer-facing farmers market app versus the district-wide farmers market app, consider building multiple versions for multiple audiences. Once I had the core web map built, it took very little time to save a version with a slightly different pop-up and put it into a different instant app. And it really speaks to a totally different audience, and it's very simple to do. So definitely consider making multiple versions and repackaging your core map into ways that's going to serve different audiences better through these different ways to share your web map. All right, so I want to just end there. I know that was a lot, but like I said, there are sessions that have taken place over the past 3 days that go into a lot of these concepts in a lot more detail that I encourage you to watch, as you'll have access to the platform for a little bit longer. Also, the ebook goes into a lot more resources associated with these topics, and I encourage you to check it out. So now I believe it's question and answer time.
Yeah, we have some more questions here. Let's see, are instant apps downloadable after configured and web hosted like we can do with Web App Builder in ArcGIS Online?
Yes, they'll show up as another ArcGIS Online item. So very similar to Web App Builder. I don't know about the download, how you would download an instant app.
No, web
because-
apps,
Okay.
web apps can't be downloaded. I'm familiar with that capability in Web App Builder,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, you can't do that same thing with the instant apps right now.
Okay. Several questions related to pop-ups, Diana, as you were going through. What happens to side pop-ups in an app?
Side pop-ups, meaning the side panel that was displayed in one of my apps, that's pulling directly from the pop-up that's associated with the web map that's behind the app.
Okay. Will these pop-ups be preserved in an app?
Yes, yes. Pop-ups and apps are designed to, apps are going to be pulling from your web maps pop-up, and pop-ups travel very well into web apps.
So to be clear about that, we're in an interesting place where we're transitioning most of the momentum with our configurable apps into the instant app style. And I know a lot of you are also in the transition going from Map Viewer Classic to the new Map Viewer. And there are additional things that you can do in the new Map Viewer that with pop-ups that are not supported in some of the classic configurable apps, the kind of the older configurable apps, but they are supported in instant apps. So some of it you have to make decisions about what you want to do or what you want to present. If you're using one of the older configurable apps and you've designed a pop-up or even leveraged some other capability like rotation in in the new map viewer, then those don't carry over into the classic configurable app. So you need to think a little bit about what your ultimate destination or goal is.
Okay. We have a couple questions. Well, a question and a comment related to the dark base map. One is just hate the dark maps.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, they do have their uses, but the other is, can my audience choose whether they want to see my maps in light or dark mode?
That's a great question. And actually, the audience cannot. And it's the map maker or the map author who gets to choose whether or not it's in light or dark. And that has implications then for what symbology you choose. And so it's best to let the map maker have the control and the decision point there for how they're styling their map. And
It also depends on how you present the map. So if you want to, you can include a base map gallery in, when you take the map and you publish it through one of the configurable apps or instant apps. So you could enable capabilities for people to change the base map to whatever they want. You can do that in either the map viewers as well. But in general, especially for the super high-end cartography that Diana and her team are involved with, it really is the author's choice and decision about the best way to present the content there. And it's not as simple as just switching from a dark to a light, because oftentimes the way things are symbolized has been specifically chosen based on, we're going to start with this dark base map and these symbols are going to pop the best on that and so forth. So it's not, yes, you can do it, but it may not be the wisest thing to enable people to do.
Okay.
mm-hmm.
Okay, Sadie Newman asks, can you embed a dashboard or other apps in a story map?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any examples offhand, but that's absolutely possible.
Yeah, and you can embed it with a nice looking embed card if you just want to like provide like an image and some blurb about it, like a kind of social media look, or you can really embed the whole thing into your story map directly.
That's actually a good point. What I find with story maps is most people seem to think that they always want a live map or a scene or embed an app. And in some cases, I think that actually detracts from the experience, because, stories about telling a story, maybe you don't even need that live map, or if you do, maybe you just include a link to it like Diana just described, rather than just embed it. Some of the more complicated things actually do have a little bit of overhead as they're being used and viewed, so it might be better to pop those out separately outside the context of the story itself. So you might want to play around with just some different ways of approaching embedding the different types of content that you can in a story map.
Yeah, and it's more
suggestion.
than a link. It's like it's a whole embed card, which is an option that I use a lot, where you can control the title and the thumbnail image that comes through, and provide a little sentence or two as well in a card in a story map.
Okay.
So actually, there's a question that came up, which I thought was pretty interesting, and I can kind of pop in and show this real quick. Someone asked, is there a way to have a pop-up with hover over? And that is absolutely possible. Let me just do a quick share here.
Stop.
And okay, so I believe we're sharing my screen here. I'm using actually the Minimalist Instant app, and here I've added a map, and one of the toggles here is enable hover pop-up. So right now, by default, the pop-up just displays over the map, or I can make it a dockable pop-up and it'll remember that place in the map. Or what I can do is by checking this toggle here, now everything's done by hover text. Right, so it even remembered the dock window with the hover text, so you can do things like that. Now, this technique is best used when you don't have tons and tons of things. Obviously, if we zoomed out a little bit, it's very difficult to see what I'm hovering over. But for certain types of maps and kind of a maybe more limited number of features, then this hover capability is definitely very useful and provides a really interactive experience. And that's done app by app. In this case, I did it by going into the
Bern, they're not seeing the screen.
Oh, that was wonderful. Let's try that. Let's try that one more time. All right, why don't we go on to the next question? I'll regroup here, and we'll see if we can bring that back.
Okay. There are a couple questions related to usage credits. Can you talk through the usage tab in ArcGIS Online? What counts as a view request? And does search location consume some credits?
Search location does not consume credits unless you're geocoding and creating a feature layer. But if someone's just typing in a location in a map or a web app that you've created, that will not consume credits.
Okay.
But the usage tab more generally,
I think Bern can answer that when he's
yeah.
when he's available.
Okay, sorry, I was distracted here trying to get a share. Can you see a share or no?
Yes, Los Angeles healthcare facilities.
Oh, finally. Okay.
Okay.
So I just
we'll come back to the usage question after you show this.
Let's go back to that. So I'm using the minimalist instant app here in this case, and by default, the pop-ups just appear. This is a docked pop-up, and I can also kind of change it to just the default location for pop-ups, which is next to the feature, wherever best fit is. Now here in the minimalist, I have a little radio button that I can toggle to enable hover text. So now as I hover, I don't have to click, it's just automatically revealed. And the interesting thing about this is, let me turn that off for a second. I can also dock that window and then enable hover. And now that docked window is persisted and anything I hover over is displayed there. And again, as I mentioned in closing, when you couldn't see what I was doing, there's a ton of features in the map that hover text really doesn't work so well. It works better with a smaller number of features or when you're zoomed into specific areas. So I'm sorry that I messed up the screen share. Now going back to Matt, would you like to recap that question about credit consumption?
Yeah, can you talk through the usage tab in ArcGIS Online? What counts as a view request?
That's kind of a mysterious thing. Actually in ArcGIS Online for an item, it's whenever that item is actually accessed. And I know I'm being vague here because to tell you the truth, I really don't know the answer. But it is a rough indicator of how popular that particular item is. It doesn't necessarily show all of the views or uses of that map or app just simply because it could be embedded or used in a story map, and those views wouldn't necessarily ratchet up at that point.
Okay. Related to credits, has anyone of authority at Esri ever talked about getting rid of the credit system?
Yes, and that's actually been, there's actually not a lot of things that require credits in terms of, are you talking about Living Atlas premium subscriber content or something specific, or just credits in general for performing analysis and things like that? Maybe you can send something into the questions again to clarify that. But we have to recover costs somehow, and some of that cost is recovered when we charge credits for use of premium subscriber content, say in Living Atlas. And a lot of that reason is because we owe the sources of that data royalties or money every time their content is used. For other things, there's actually not a whole lot that really consumes credits. Analysis does. So when you perform an analysis, that will consume credits, but there are various credit budgeting techniques you can apply. So for example, when you're doing an analysis, you can limit the analysis to your current view area, which really does optimize credit consumption. There's also a little button you can push to tell you how many credits your operation will consume. And from an administrator's point of view, you can establish credit caps so that users don't inadvertently consume a bunch of credits for doing things. There are not a lot of things which consume tons and tons of credits. Batch geocoding, however, is one of those. So, and also publishing massive amounts of features can also consume a bunch of credits. But beyond that, actually credit consumption is relatively minimal. If you're careful and if you have an organization, you might want to button down, put a credit consumption limit on your members. what happens then is if they submit a job or something that's going to consume over that, then it has to go to the admin for a review, and they can either okay or not that that task.
Yeah, and there's some good information in the ebook about how to manage credit consumption, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, on the topic of usage for Experience Builder, can we see proportion of users who access via mobile device versus desktop?
That I do not know the answer of, but we can certainly find that out for you. In fact, Jin Shah and I, who's the lead product manager on Experience Builder, was just messaging me a little while ago. We can find those answers out for you. So a good way to get a hold of us is just send email directly at the beginning. We had our emails there. Anybody can drop me an email. I'll be glad to follow up and get some of these questions that we can answered. And also, as I mentioned, we are going to take a dump of all of these questions, and we're going to send them back to you after we research all the answers. So we'll provide that to you after the session, and we'll put something up on the Esri ArcGIS Online community to announce the availability of all that.
Okay. Is there a plan to eventually phase out the classic map viewer, or will that remain functional indefinitely along with Web App Builder for Developers Edition?
That's also a very good question, and one that's timely, just because we've now, as of the last release, made the new map viewer the default for new organizations and are strongly encouraging people to migrate to the new map viewer from Classic. That said, there are still some pretty significant areas of functional disparity. So there's some things that you can't do in the new map viewer that you can only do in Classic. Analysis is one of those. Working with the new ArcGIS image tools is another one of those. So there are some pretty significant things that still need to be leveraged. Even things like drag and drop of a CSV file onto a map is not yet supported in the new map viewer, but it certainly will be. So the goal is that we have to reach functional parity, and it's unclear when exactly we might hit that. It might be later this year, or perhaps the first release next year. We do plan on keeping Classic around for quite a long time. The user experience in the new map viewer is what I would call dynamic. I mean, a lot of us are still trying to get our heads around it. We're trying to make some decisions about, a lot of that is based on your feedback about what's the best way and whether we've hit the mark in terms of the experience. So I expect that to be adapting for quite some time. We have no intention whatsoever of pulling out the classic map viewer until we are confident that everybody is fine and ready for that.
Okay. And speaking of the new map viewer, how do you configure colors and text font styles in the new map viewer? I'm still new to the new map viewer and not seeing it. Is there a good reference for this?
Diana, are you aware of a good reference for that?
I am not sure what they mean in terms of text. I know labels on your map. If you want text for the labels, there's a lot of different options, and I can send this person blogs on that. Fonts in the pop-ups can also be changed in terms of the color and stuff, like I showed in one of my maps. And then if you want to build your own custom base map with fonts, that's available as well. So I hope this person is signed in so that I can send them some resources on some of those topics. But there are links to the blogs that I will send in the ebook as well. And like I mentioned, and Bern has mentioned, we update the ebook pretty frequently too.
And you know how to get a hold of us, so we're happy to answer questions post-session here. And they help us figure out some additional materials that we might need to create in terms of blogs or whatever to help eliminate some confusion or provide additional help. And it's also feedback that can go directly back to the teams. And for a lot of that, I also encourage participation, active participation in the Esri community. So no matter what your interest, whether it's Map Viewer or Web App Builder or Experience Builder, the Esri community provides question and answer forums and blogs and things like that, which I think are really helpful.
Okay. What are ArcGIS online labs? I think somebody saw your screen being shared there.
Oh yeah, that was kind of a mistake here. So that's just my organization, and I use that to stage workshops, and I use that to support blogs with examples and things like that. So that's just my Esri organization.
Please explain why one would use dashboard versus hub versus experience.
Okay. Well, as is usual at Esri, there's many ways to solve your needs and problems, and a lot of the choices that you make are basically dependent on some specific things. So for example, you mentioned dashboards. So dashboards I kind of think of as a really amazing app builder, even though they're not necessarily considered app builders, but dashboards are meant to provide an experience where you can have a map with charts and interactive lists and things like that. So to me, that's separate than some of the other things that you can build in terms of a destination. Experience Builder is a great way to actually create dashboard-like applications. It's also a great way to create destinations, but it's a little more complicated and does require perhaps a higher level of expertise. So when I think about things that I might recommend to users for building apps or building destinations like hubs or things like that, there's the easy low-hanging fruit, right? If I want to build a destination, then a homepage editor is great. Hubs are really easy. If I want to do that with Experience Builder, then that requires a different level of expertise and perhaps someone that isn't just a casual user of Experience Builder, but actually dedicates some of their time. So that question has to be answered in the context of who's actually doing the work and things like that. There's no ideal answer to all of those. But in terms of destinations, hubs are awesome. They're super duper powerful and very, very popular. And again, if you go to hub.arcgis.com, there'll be a gallery of existing hubs, and you'll get some really good ideas about what you can implement with those.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to echo about the dashboard versus Experience Builder, and even instant apps versus Experience Builder. I think of instant apps as like point and click, really, really easy to configure, hence the name instant. Whereas Experience Builder, you're totally starting with a blank canvas, which gives you more control over what you're ultimately going to build. But as Bern said, it will take a lot more time and expertise. So if an instant app fits your needs, I would do it in that, just for simplicity's sake. Or if a hub site fits your needs, for sure.
So another thing to consider is that the new map viewer uses our latest JavaScript API. The Instant Maps apps, I should say, also use that same JavaScript API. So they support all of the new things that you can do in the map viewer, like the blending options, the rotation, all the neat things you can do in the pop-up. So part of it is you have to make decisions about what your destination app is and then use the correct or build the correct map to support what the destination app is. Not all the apps have been brought up to the same support with our latest JavaScript API. That's something that continues over time, but that's just a little something that you might need to think of as you start crafting your maps and apps.
Okay, Latoya Gray Sparks asks, I'm interested in exploring dashboards more. Are there templates available for dashboard newbies to help us get acclimated with the app?
So one of the really great things about dashboards is that it's very easy to create dashboard templates. In fact, Diana and other members of her team have actually built dashboards and have templatized those. You want to talk a little bit more about that, Diana?
Yeah. It's pretty easy to pick where your map is going to go and then add a gauge or a list or a chart or something like that, and say you really, really like that configuration. It's easy to set that as a template that you'll then reuse and repackage as you're building future dashboards.
There's also some good blogs about how to build dashboards. I actually ran into a question from someone the other day I wrote a simple blog about how to build your first dashboard. And I realized when I was answering the question that I need to update that because I used Dashboard Classic to do that. It still kind of works, but there's some little changes in the UX which might throw you off a little bit. But that blog is still there. You can search it at blogs.arcgis.com and just search for dashboards and it'll turn up. So I will update that. That's on my top priority list to update blog articles.
And we'll make sure that a link in our ebook goes to your updated blog on that.
Yeah. So we still have about 10 minutes left and we still have some more questions here. We'll keep going as long as we can. Which experience builder template is closest to Web App Builder?
I would say none of them are because they're completely different experiences when you're creating an app. And I used experience there to define that. So Web App Builder, I like to think of as instead of configuring an application template like an instant app, what you do is you configure widgets, which you can place in different places around your map. So it's a collection of configurable widgets rather than it is configuring a template. And Experience Builder is really completely different than that. There are experience templates that they can use, but inherently Experience Builder is a blank slate. And you can choose from a variety of different templates to kind of get you started. It's a very powerful environment, but also as a result of that, it's just a little bit more complicated. I think some people are intimidated when they first begin doing that. I'm a very simple-minded person, and I think that if I can do it simply, that's the best way to go forward. But if you can do it in an instant app, I'd recommend that. If you prefer Web App Builder, that's a little, maybe a hair more of a challenge, but not much more. If you go to Experience Builder, then you're sort of upping the bar. And personally, this is certainly not Esri commentary, but me personally, I think to be really successful with Experience Builder, you need to kind of focus a little attention to it. I don't have a lot of attention to focus on anything, ADHD anyway. So I find that when I go to Experience Builder, I kind of have to relearn some things that I'd forgotten along the way. If I was a dedicated member of an organization that was working with it on a regular basis, it would be super easy for me to do amazing things with it. But I think for me as a casual user of Experience Builder, I kind of have to remember what I've forgotten along the way. So there's different levels of technology which can best be applied to certain members of the organization or certain tasks. They're all good though.
More questions about pop-ups. Is there a way to have a pop-up with a hover over?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think so. I don't even think that's on the list. The only part of a pop-up that I can think of, Diana, and correct me about this, a pop-up with a hover over, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but like if there's a chart, you can certainly move your mouse over the chart and you'll get a dynamic readout of the current values and things like that. So you'll see that dynamic access with the chart. I'm not sure what else you would want in terms of a hover over in a pop-up. And I've already shown you that some of the apps already do support hovering to display the pop-up, and you don't have to click to display the pop-up. So that's already there. And the example I showed was in the minimalist instant app.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of depends on how you want to configure the app versus the web map itself.
Okay. Can you set the order of pop-ups? For example, I am showing zoning and parcels and city limits. I would like to see the parcels first, then zoning, then city limits.
Great question.
I'm pretty sure it's layer order, isn't it, Diana, that dictates that? Or is it still based on some of the features, like points are always first and that sort of thing?
I actually don't know what order it presents it because my strategy is to make one pop-up and turn every other pop-up off. And using Arcade, you can get information from the other layers in your map into that one pop-up. So I showed an example about the farmers markets pulling information from the SNAP retail locations, as well as poverty level and things like that from the geographic area that I'm interested in. If you have an order that you're interested in, then make your pop-up say, okay, here's geography 1, and then geography 2, and then geography 3, all within the one pop-up. And then just to declutter your map and declutter the user experience.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And oftentimes having the cursor through multiple layers is difficult, especially for a more public audience. You have to look for that little arrow at the top and know to move on to the next feature and so forth. And I think, Diana, you've just hit it. Like, that's the perfect solution. It's up to the map author to pull in what's required to present information in a really good way, and less layers that have pop-ups are more better.
Exactly, less is more, especially in your apps. Because you just want that nice clean side panel to show one pop-up.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Here's another question from Lucas. Do you recommend rebuilding any older configurable apps with the new map viewer and instant apps?
That is a question. I think the real answer is it depends. And it depends if your existing older configurable apps are working fine, and there's nothing that you need to do in the underlying maps that requires leveraging new capabilities in the new map viewer, and therefore the JavaScript API 4.x based instant apps, then you're good to go. We never get rid of those old configurable app templates. They're there, even though they might not be exposed in galleries. They're still hosted in ArcGIS Online, so you can be confident that they will continue to be usable. But there will come a time when you're going to want to take advantage of some new capabilities or just a better app user experience or capabilities of the new map viewer, and that'll be when you want to jump over and rebuild and reconfigure those.
Okay, question related to projections. Are projection changes possible? The farther north we go, the worse the default web map projection becomes.
So the projection of the web map is based on the projection of the base map. So if you search Living Atlas, you'll find some examples of maps that are using the polar projections, for example. Whatever, and I know organizations that actually have to deal in a multi-projection environment where they use Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere just because it allows you to play in the universe with everybody else, but they also have whatever requirements to use a state or a local projection. So what they tend to do is create base maps at two different projections, and whatever the base map projection is, layers, as they can be, will be projected on the fly onto the projection of the base map. So that would be one way to approach that.
Okay. When will ArcGIS Online have a layer file type export of a layer where you can have complex pop-up symbology, label, etc., like Pro or Desktop, where one can reuse the layer properties and have to redo it again when adding a new layer?
So I think you're talking about the layer file capabilities in Desktop, and that exports a file that you can apply to other layers. Right now, with ArcGIS Online, when you configure a layer, and this is important if you're making building blocks for other members of your organization to use building block layers, you can use save as to save the layer properties. And again, this is one of those things that's not yet supported in the new map viewer, but is supported in Map Viewer Classic. So you can configure your pop-ups, all that stuff, and use save layer, and it'll preserve that in a layer so people don't have to go through all that process later on. That is coming to the new map viewer next release. I know that for a fact. Beyond that, another thing that we're looking at is the ability to copy the style of one layer to another layer. So that's something that we're working on, and that'll be coming as well as we move down the road a little bit in the future, and that'll be a good way to do that. One of the issues with what we have right now in the web environment is there's issues with security when you're providing access or gateways into the local environment, which is what you'd need to save a file. Might be a way that we could look at saving that file as something within the ArcGIS Online ecosystem, but we're still working on other problems. But I think the save layer and the transfer layer configurations from one layer to another will go a long way to making that much better.
Okay, I think we have less than a minute left here. We did not get to all the questions, but we will answer them offline and share that later, correct, Bernie?
We will. And Matt's going to capture all these questions and export them. We're going to take your email addresses if you've provided them, and we'll send you an announcement. Otherwise, stay tuned to the ArcGIS Online Esri community, and we'll post up the resources. So it'll be a link to a group, and we'll post those probably in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks. Anyway, a lot of us are going away on vacation after this week, but we'll regroup and expect them sometime in early August, I guess. And I just like to say, I always love doing this session. It's always great to be presenting here with Diana. And it's really great that Matt's helped us out quite a bit here today, especially with getting that ebook published, which is, I think, a really good resource that we hope to keep pushing forward and keep updating.
And if you haven't downloaded the ebook yet, please go to go.esri.com/extend.
All right, everyone. Hope
Thank
you had a
you.
great conference. Thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Thanks.